The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Welcome back to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author. We got a big one for you today, but we got a great one for you today. So I'm really excited to get into some of these interviews. But before we do that, please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We're at Florida Beer Blog. If you're on the Facebook, we are at FL Beer Blog, or you can obviously follow us at FloridaBeerBlog.com or FloridaBeerPodcast.com. We got some really interesting interviews today, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to head up to Panama City, Florida. Not exactly the place that you would think of for craft beer in the state, but they are the home of History Class Brewing, which I am particularly excited about, not just because it's craft beer, but because they take a strong focus on using their beers to celebrate the history and the culture of the area. So we're going to speak with Allan Branch. He's co-founder of History Class Brewing, and we're going to learn some amazing stories of the area and the beers that inspired them. Enjoy. So, Allan, I think the first question that I will ask is not so much why did you name your brewery History Class, because that's question number 2, but in terms of Panama City, is there a lot of local history to celebrate?
Well, I think there is. We're not Gettysburg. We don't have bullets in the ground and, things like that. But I think most cities have a fascinating time. If you really start studying cities were created by ordinary people, mostly real estate developers, who said a town would be really great here. A port would be really great here. A farm, things that people created towns. They just kind of banded together and they built things that the town needed. And that really is at the heart of entrepreneurship to me. So, Panama City has great history. I don't think our history is completely unique to our town. I think a lot of towns have great history.
Awesome. And so when you and your two partners decided to create History Class Brewing Company, why was it so important to you to focus on and celebrate that local history that you have?
Well, we only have one partner. It's me and another partner, Tim Whaler. There's only two of us. We do have a manager who will eventually be an owner in the company, but currently we do have an operational manager. The reason why we decided to celebrate the history of our town is, a lot of times breweries pick a body of water, a lake, a river, a bay, or a mountain, or a valley, and they name their town or their brewery around that centralized thing. We have a beautiful bay here, so certainly St. Andrews Bay Brewery was a name we considered. I love the stories of this town. I live downtown. I actually live across the street from the brewery, which was the center of the town. Like literally the center of the town, the little village that first started as Panama City, started right here. I live behind the first mayor's house. And so we just couldn't pick a name. We couldn't pick one story that was like, that's the story. And I think a lot of smaller cities, Panama City is 35,000 people. Our county is 150,000 people. And small cities are kind of like redheaded stepchildren. And they kind of marginalize themselves. They look up to larger cities, Atlanta, Orlando, wherever. And they go, well, we're not as cool as those guys. And I think to love a place, you need to know a few of the stories. And if we can facilitate that, if we can shine a light on the special people. If you look at history of a town, a lot of it, unless you're talking about a battlefield, a lot of it are stories about people pouring themselves into the community. The names on your streets are people who poured themselves into the community. The names of the schools and the gyms and the bridges are all people who poured themselves into the community. And I couldn't pick one. And so I love the idea of celebrating people who put themselves and poured themselves in the community. And so we named ourselves History Class because we like all the stories.
That's kind of amazing. And you definitely focus a lot on very specific people from the community, because I'm taking a look at some of the beers that you have, and some of the beers are just straight up names of people. Obviously, I do wish that I was able to visit Miracle Strip Amusement Park.
Yeah.
But one of the beers that you have, your East Coaster, is just named straight up for the artist who designed all the rides, Val Valentine.
Yeah, there's so many great stories, and honoring those people, even though a lot of them didn't drink. Like we named one after Ella May, who was a predominant woman in the town in the early 1900s. I know her granddaughter, and her granddaughter, who's 70 years old, was like, my grandmother never had a beer. But she loves the fact that someone named a beer after her grandmother and remembers that story of her family. You know, there's heroic stories. There are stories about, and every town has these. Every town probably has a story of a hero. Every town has a story, especially, Black history stories. Like the first, and we're going to be celebrating this man soon, Officer Wilson. Officer Wilson was the first Black police officer in this town, and they gave him a car that wouldn't go in reverse, right, and told him, you can't arrest white people, right? Like that is a person. These people should be celebrated. These are trailblazing people who made this town better. And every town has these stories. And so as opposed to naming your beer some sort of meme joke, that the 23-year-old hipster likes, I think it's a lot more timely to celebrate people. As a marketer, I have brewed beer. I can brew beer. But as a marketer, as someone, I find it a lot more value in the idea that I can create a video and a story about a person who deserves to be celebrated than just naming it like, whatever, ditch water. And it's, or something, some sort of meme name that is a fly-by-night name. It doesn't feel like that's going to be around a long time. I want to build businesses that are here for 50 years. So celebrating timeless stories feels like it could be here for 50 years.
And obviously you said that you're from the area and you live right across the street from the brewery, but when it comes time to create a new beer, when it comes time to name a new beer, what is the process for researching the community and the people to find someone? Do you start with the person and work towards the beer to honor them, or do you start with the beer and then you look for a person to honor? Both ways. And then sometimes we run out of names and we go, this is just called the Summer Session Ale. And so, the hard part is figuring out, we have a very small system. We're a 4-barrel brew house with 27 barrels of fermentation. And it's hard to figure out what beers, we rotate beers so often. What is a beer that we want to do a one-off of? And that's a name that really, I don't want to take a great story and just use it as a one-off name. And so finding a beer that we know is going to stick around for a while and then an appropriate story to match that. And the beers truly don't have to be like the Val Valentine is an East Coast IPA because Val was a foggy kind of a guy or a hazy, you don't have to, it could just be like, hey, we named it this name because this is a person that's worth celebrating. I think there is our Irish ale has a tie into a person who's Irish, but beyond that, there's no like major tie to the beer, just beyond like this is a person that deserves to be celebrated. Sure. And obviously it's not just people, but it's things, and some of them are obviously no longer with us. Do you get a lot of locals that come in, and of the locals, do they take a look at some of the beers and understand not only who you're talking about, but they sort of reminisce? Because I'm taking a look right now. One of your porters on tap is Sirloin, and I've never seen this before, but I'm actually taking a look at a giant Viking statue, King Arthur guard that I guess used to be the sign of an old steakhouse there. Do people order that and remember and reminisce?
There are stories that hit on more of a nostalgia than true, like they have and nostalgia is a remembrance of a time, right? So, if you're talking about the local Indian tribes, people typically aren't going, I remember when they were here, because that was, a couple hundred years ago. But certainly things like you're referencing Sirloin, which was like this 5 or 6 story concrete sculpture that originally was a king of the State House. They had nightly specials, nightly with a K, and he was Sirloin, and then it got changed to a King Neptune, like in the 80s. So people my age remember it as King Neptune. It's gone now, but yes, you absolutely see people coming in because people will come in to buy beer they're literally voting with their dollars of what they like. So people will come in and buy beers, especially to-go beers right now, of a beer they wouldn't even come in and buy unless it had a name that responded to them emotionally. You know, people that are relatives to certain names, people who live on certain, if we name a beer Mound Avenue, and they live on Mound Avenue, that whole street of people will go, well, I want to try that beer. And I think what history does, history is sort of like the great equalizer. And in that breweries, it's so much fun to walk into this brewery and see 80-year-old people, gray-haired people, drinking beer next to 20-year-olds. And the older people, this town, you know, Panama City is such a small town. We're not a great beer market to be in. And history makes people take a little more notice to it. It gives us a little more grace to our property owners around us if we're loud, because they know we're here. It's more than just beer. You know, we're celebrating people. We're celebrating this town. So it's so much fun seeing people respond emotionally to the brand and the things that we're talking about, not just the beer and the food, which is amazing, but other things. I think that's really special to bring people together like that.
Yeah, gotcha. Do you have a lot of your regulars that know the history of the city as well and say, hey, here's this person or here's this place. Maybe you should talk about them in a new beer release?
Oh, so many times. My family's been here for 80 years, and they've been the longest entrepreneurial family in this county. We have restaurants and stuff that are still open that my grandfather started in the 40s. And so I learned a story 6 months ago about a man named Jack Mashborn. And I was hoping he was still alive. We named a beer after Jack Mashborn. Jack Mashborn was a 23-year-old state representative for us. It was 60s, and there was no beaches. There was no black beaches in Florida. There was no place for black people to go on the beach legally. Bay County had the first black allowed beach where black people could go and have their space. And he created that. And because of that, and because the South, he only lasted one term. But that was what he did. He accomplished the first beach that black people were allowed to go to in Florida. And I had never heard this story. And come to find out, my dad said, yeah, this is a man who used to bring magnolia flowers to all the offices downtown. And everybody loved this guy. So people are always bringing you stories about celebrate this person or celebrate this road, or do you know the story of this thing? And the stories start coming to you. And
that's kind of awesome.
That's been a lot of fun too. Yeah.
Nice. The one story that I do want to hear about, and I'll go ahead and let you leave with this because it may take a few minutes. With History Class Brewing, with a lot of the images that you show on social media and on the website and everything, what seems to be the signature beer, or at least the signature story of your beers, is who is named for your porter, simply called the Hero.
Yeah.
Who was that named after?
You know, this is one of the truly, I would say, and not marginalizing Jack Mashborn. Jack Mashborn's story is truly heroic. But the hero porter story is Lieutenant Edwin Gorbet. We have a large Air Force base here called Tyndall Air Force Base. And in the 60s, Lieutenant Gorbet was a 23-year-old test pilot testing new jets. And he took off one morning and was flying across the town, and his plane started malfunctioning. It caught on fire. And they have the recording where he's calling into Tyndall Air Force Base, telling them the problem, and they say, you need to eject. But he's looking down, heading towards our middle school at the time. Mm-hmm. My uncle was at the middle school at lunch, at recess, on the playground. And he remembers seeing a man flying over their head. He could see the man's plane on fire, cockpit off. He decides not to eject, to hang a left, hoping to get towards our bay to crash into the bay. But as he banks left, the plane explodes about a quarter mile from the school, about southwest of the school. He would have crashed in the school during lunch, killing hundreds of children. Instead, he banks left and saves their lives, taking his own. And so you hear that story. That's a story that, there's a monument for him. I didn't know what this monument was for. And what's truly special about that story was it's for us in this town, that's a story of like salvation. Like these guys saved us. But for another family, that's a tragic story of how they lost a son, an uncle, a cousin. And when we pushed that story out, and they're a family who doesn't live here anymore. They never lived here. He was just stationed here. But when we put the story out, I guess his cousin and little sister, who's like 70 years old now, had looked for pictures of their relative and found our story of him.
Wow.
They live like in Utah, and they're 70-something years old. They were blown away and excited that their cousin, who they vaguely remember, they were like 12 and 13, and he was their older cousin, older brother. And they reached out to us and they said, "Can we buy shirts?" And we're like, "No, my God, we'll send them to you." And so all these, older people. I mean, we probably sent them 25 shirts, and so we start getting these posts of 70-year-old men and women wearing the shirt of their cousin, and that's just super cool. It's super cool. It's fun celebrating that. It deserves to be celebrated.
That's amazing. Very quickly, where can everybody find information on not only History Class Brewing, but also the beers? And what's neat about the website that you have is you actually have links to stories to some of those.
Yeah, so one of the things I build software companies is really how I fund these projects, but and a video production company too. So between video projects for software companies, we're filming historic videos and trying to document those stories, because these stories are every story is fragile. A generation or two, if they're not written down or recorded, they get lost. And it's gone. And but historyclass.beer is the website. We're very active on social media. If you go to History Class on, everything but TikTok. If you go to Instagram or Facebook, you'll find us at History Class. And we're always pushing video content and stories, and that's part of the fun.
All right. Excellent. Allan Branch, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If you listened to me at the top of the podcast today, the first thing that you hopefully did, if you haven't already, is to join us on our social media channels. Social media is pretty big for craft brewers. It's the only source of information for most of them, since they usually don't have big advertising budgets. And one of the absolute best in the business is Leaven Brewing in Riverview, which is close to Tampa. Their social media channels are run by Jillian Lynch, co-founder and part of the Lynch team that runs Leaven. And so I actually got her on the phone to talk about her amazing social media game, some of the things that they are doing on Instagram, how much they share about just the day-to-day ennui that is running a brewery, and more. So, obviously, as the co-owner and co-founder of Leaven Brewing, you have been with the brewery since the very beginning. At what point in the creation and opening of the brewery did you decide that you needed a solid social media presence?
I don't know that we so much decided we needed a social media presence. I think it happened just really organically. Literally, day one of dreaming up Leaven, I had my camera out. We took a picture of either the space or the keys we had gotten, or both. And I wrote day one, Leaven Brewing, whatever my caption was. And we kind of rolled with it. So, we were there obviously every day thereafter. And so it was day 2 and then day 3 and what was happening at, Leaven day 7. And people really started to take to it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. I've never seen a social media account, we're talking very specifically about Instagram here because I've got that pulled up, that nobody has ever done a rolling count of the number of days that they've been around. And yesterday, the last time you posted was day 1339. So how difficult has it been to really make sure to keep up that little bit of social media? Because I'm sure that there were times where you just said, hey, maybe I should just take a break.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was really easy because there was something new and exciting happening literally every day. And as you get into, running the business just day to day, it becomes more rote and there's not much to talk about. So you have to get really creative in, including people in on your day and not just being like, oh, here's a picture of a beer. It's day 12,000, 1,200, whatever.
And I guess as a big picture with social media in the craft beer scene, why is it so prevalent? Because everybody seems to have either Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or a combination of the big three.
Yeah. So, I think about that often. I don't have a media background. Often I get accolades for our social media presence, which I just find to be so funny because I don't think I'm doing anything that spectacular. But what I've realized is in beer, we are so small. It feels big because we're located in Tampa and craft beer is really popular. However, compared to many other industries, whether it be potato chips or other forms of hard alcohol, we don't need to advertise via radio or TV commercial or newspaper because that all just feels too cold for this industry. And beer is really personal. So I think that's why we're on all of these personal pages, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Those would normally belong to someone who was just a, regular person walking around. But when businesses start to use those, it's almost like the business has this, persona or personality. And that's much more craft beer than leading into a radio advertising.
And it's great that you kind of mentioned the persona because, for my social media channels, I talk and I act very differently on those than I would in my real life. When you're creating the account, is there a cognitive shift in the difference between Jillian Lynch and Leaven Brewing and how the two communicate on socials?
I would say Jillian at Leaven is the same person you get Jillian in real life. And like I said, that all just started really organically. I've gotten some pushback, haters, if you will say, that say our Instagram is run as if I were, a 14-year-old influencer girl. But it's like, we're so small. We have this tiny little community. It's my husband and myself putting everything we have into this business. So, like I said, I don't have a media training. So all I can do is be super transparent with you and bring you along on my day to day. So I'm the same person on Instagram as I am if we were, sitting at dinner.
And it's interesting that you get the hate because it's one of the things that I actually find very creative and intriguing about the accounts that you run is if you take a look, especially on the Instagram stories, you will readily go through a normal day. If you're doing paperwork, you'll show everybody is like, hey, here's the kind of stuff that we're doing. I know that when COVID hit, you had shut down for a little while, at least for on-site consumption, and you were showing all the changes that you were making to the tap room and the cleaning and all that's going on. With all of the sort of insider look that you post on social media, do you get a lot of people that are either in the industry as brewers or want to become brewers that thank you for that insight and that view of what it's like to actually live the life?
Yeah, it's actually really cool. I would say my interaction with people on Instagram is huge. Maybe not so much through comment listed under photos because I don't feel as if likes and comments matter so much. I know there's an algorithm. I honestly just don't lean into it. But the kind of messages I get of people being like, hey, so you don't know me, but I've been following y'all for a long time. I just recently started brewing beer. Do you think I could possibly bring some by? I heard you talking about this kind of malt. That's what I want to use. Would KJ have any advice for me? And it's like, dang, that's cool. Someone's been watching me. They started their own thing, and now they want to lean on us for advice. I feel so close to people online. It's kind of awkward. And, even like we'll be at Publix and people are like, hey, you're with Leaven, right? And I'm like, oh, crap. Should I know this person? And it's like, nope, they just follow us on Leaven's page so they know my face. And it's like, it's just a way to connect with the community that I didn't think would happen to this extreme.
It's kind of amazing. And obviously you'll share a number of other things. I know a couple months ago you posted that you and KJ, your husband, were expecting your first child. So congratulations.
Yes,
because of your following, have you gotten a lot of obviously congratulatory statements, but baby gifts or anything that are being sent to the brewery yet?
We are being spoiled. I'm just so grateful. Honestly, we were just talking about this last night. It's like anybody who had something in their garage pertaining to a baby that they didn't want anymore and they wanted to bless us with has now ended up in my garage. So I'm really grateful.
That's amazing. And obviously, it's not just about you, but it's about the community as a whole. And so many breweries try to make sure that they are able to promote and enhance the community that they're in. Because you have this amazing outreach on social media, do you ever use that power to redirect people towards other benefits and other organizations and causes that you feel are important?
Yes, absolutely. There's a couple of things that go along with this question. Number one, I think in having a social media platform like ours, you kind of become this authority on beer. Not that I know the most about beer or not that my words are the most curated, but it's like we have this responsibility to beer that we need to uphold. And so I'm always very aware of making the platform kind of education based. Like I always want you to know what we're doing and the why behind it, not just here's a photo of a beer, come buy it, because that is just very much not us. And then second, we like to promote things that are good for the community because I truly believe mental health is not addressed enough. And so long story short, I'm on the Florida Brewers Guild board and we've started a mental wellness initiative. I've paired us up with Hope for the Day, which is, they help with suicide prevention and just talking about the things people don't talk about. Fast forward, they decided to do a nationwide collaboration. It's called Things We Don't Say IPA. We're taking part in that. It's on my social media platform. And from that, I've gotten an array of support of, hey, I'm in the community. I work with this foundation, or, hey, I have this knowledge about mental wellness. If you want to lean on us for support, I can help in this way. So, you want to make sure that it's not just alcohol that you're, putting out into the world, but it's, hey, how can we better our community as a whole?
That's amazing. Yeah, I was taking a look at that, your post from day 1337. About things we don't say and how important that is and how heartfelt the comment that you put in there was, much more than just, hey, we're making this beer, kind of like you mentioned. Right, is there ever anything that you shouldn't put on or don't want to put on social media? I've seen some breweries, not so much here in Florida, but elsewhere, that have come under significant fire for some pretty anti-popular attitudes that they've promoted on their social media pages.
Yeah, I would say social media is kind of like going on a first date. There are certain subjects you avoid because you don't want to scare that person away until you get a little more familiar with them. So, knowing those topics, never talk about your ex. Obviously, that's a bad one. So it's like avoid some subjects. They just don't belong in the space that is the sacred space of beer. And then you kind of learn your followers and you learn common sense and, you add those things together. And I think you can keep it under control.
Gotcha. And finally, for anybody that's really looking to start a brewery or really jump into social media like this, what places, what platforms are generally most important to make sure to cover?
As far as like the actual app itself?
Yeah, because I know that you do a lot of your work on Instagram, and I know that's one of my more popular channels as well.
Yeah. So that's what, I only use Instagram. From Instagram, I post to Facebook. And like I said, I am not a marketing genius. I don't look at the back end analytics of stuff. I think if we utilized Facebook a little bit more smart, we could probably have more reach, but that's just not something we're focusing on right now. I would say if the kids are using it, maybe it's not for the brewery. Like TikTok, I am disinterested. I think Snapchat was a thing. Maybe there's probably new ones out there. I don't know. I feel old at this point, so I stick with Instagram.
That's awesome. And if you want to find them on Instagram, obviously it's at Leaven Brewing. Jillian, Lynch, thank you so much, and best of luck with the new brewer that you're bringing on board pretty soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, enough phone interviews. We're going to jump in the car with producer Steve as we took a drive recently to the heart of Hendry County, Florida. If you've never heard of it, I'm not shocked. It is between Palm Beach County on the Atlantic coast and Lee County on the Gulf Coast, right in the middle, right underneath Lake Okeechobee. The main city, the county seat, is LaBelle, and this is now the home of LaBelle Brewing, which is a wonderful destination brew pub that is starting to get a lot of street cred and starting to get a lot of attention. So we spoke to the owner and founder, Dan Peregrin, and their head brewer, Corey Purcell, no stranger to Florida craft beer, about building this awesome new destination brewery, the kinds of things they have going on for them, and their amazing expansion plans that are already in the works. So I guess let's set the scene. We are in LaBelle, Florida. We are in the heart of Hendry County. We're, 30 minutes away from Fort Myers?
Right about. Depending on how fast you're driving.
Gotcha. So I guess, why is this the place to open up a brewery?
Well, what I have done for my real career is represent agricultural interests all over the country. And a couple of years ago, I was in a little town called Kinston, North Carolina, which there's nothing there except farmers that grow tobacco, sweet potatoes, hogs, and chickens. And I was walking down the street, and here's a brewery in a community much like LaBelle, where all we have here, not all, but principally it's an agricultural community with oranges, sugar cane, and cattle. So I figured if they can do it in Kinston, North Carolina, I can do it here.
And I was going to say, we're close enough to Fort Myers' rather booming craft beer scene, but still removed enough to where it is your own sort of special beast. You're not beholden to a lot of the influences coming from there or coming from Tampa or so on.
Right. Plus we're far enough from the East Coast that everyone between us and West Palm, they'll come here or go there.
And so I guess, so you had this dream to build a brewery. What was it like finding the location, finding out how to build it, and then especially since you are the first in Hendry County, I would assume?
First and only.
What was that process like? Because I would assume that the local legislature doesn't have pre-built alcohol creation codes in their books.
Well, Hendry County is, if not the poorest, it's one of the poorest counties in all of Florida. And so they sort of welcomed anything new here. And the problem really was more on the federal end, because when we started, it was taking everybody, I don't care where you were in this country, 9 months or more to get a permit, a brewing license. And then once we got that, we had to get the state. So it was really slow. Post-COVID, it's much quicker. Or during COVID, shall I? But we didn't really have any pushback. And I personally don't know anything about brewing beer. Corey is the brewmeister, and he fortunately is very knowledgeable and produces a fantastic product.
Well, how did you get involved in this project? What part of the LaBelle Brewing sort of dream did you get dragged into this kicking and screaming?
I was brewing in Fort Myers, and there was an opportunity out here. Dan needed a brewer and happened to be scouting the area and ran into a friend, a fellow brewer, who gave me a really great recommendation. So gave Dan my number, and I came out for the interview in this crazy huge building, brand new in LaBelle, still under construction. He showed me brewing plans, and we talked about brewery layout and stuff, and it was great. And there's been
I kind of want to talk about the Fort Myers, the sort of Lee and Collier County brewing scene for a few seconds, because it has been completely ignored. Obviously, but the rest of the country doesn't even know this place exists. And then even with Florida, Tampa, St. Pete is obviously the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to the beer scene. Jacksonville's got a big one. They're starting to grow really big in, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, where we're from, and obviously Pensacola. But the scene correct me if I'm wrong, is really starting to show not just life, but also creativity and growing in its own special way.
Our Fort Myers beer scene, or Southwest Florida, Lee and Collier County, has been making great beer for, our first brewery is 8 years old, so it's a young scene, but I think we've been competing with Tampa beer, Jacksonville beer, Miami beer, producing anything as good as them for the whole time, really. So really proud to be a part of this growing market.
I was going to say, Hendry County is a county apart. It is a good distance away from everybody else. So you've kind of got this own culture, because the culture out here in LaBelle is very different than, what you get in Naples or in Fort Myers. But you're also part of the Southwest Florida, craft beer passport.
Yep, Ale Trail.
There we go. Ale Trail. Shout out to them. Wonderful, wonderful guys. Do you consider yourself to be part of that area? Do you consider yourself to be, I guess, area adjacent to where you can form into it, but you're still set apart a little bit? How do you let
me address that question in two ways. One, there was a restaurant down the road here called Flora and Ella's that had been here generationally, and bikers from all over the state would just use this as a destination to eat a piece of pie there and then get back on their bike and ride. And so while we knew
that must have been amazing pie.
We knew we didn't have we don't have a real craft beer market right here in LaBelle and Hendry County. We have some very loyal customers, but it's not like the scene that you see in St. Pete or elsewhere. And so the interesting thing is when I met Corey and he came on board, he was followed very closely by our distributor, Suncoast. And I never intended to get into distribution whatsoever, because you hear all kinds of stories about it's not profitable. It's you're dealing with the 800-pound gorillas, and so they came in and they said the brewery that I stole Corey from went out of business 30 days later, and so they followed him over here and said, we have to have your beer. And I said, well, we're not in distribution. He said, no, you understand, we have to have your beer. So when you think of us as a small town LaBelle brewery, actually our beer is currently distributed from Punta Gorda all the way down to Marco Island, and then we're also tied in with Southern Eagle, so north of Palm Beach up to just south of Melbourne, I guess. So we're not just stuck here in LaBelle. And so when people see our beer out and about, all of a sudden they want to do the old Flora and Ellis thing, and let's hop on a bike or in a convertible and go to LaBelle.
Interesting.
Like I promise you, there's no one on this porch right now from LaBelle.
Well,
we make it a destination. I mean, this is a beautiful property, and it's a little bit of a ride out here, but it's part of the ambiance of coming out.
And you're absolutely correct, because it's an absolutely beautiful, and like you said, this was custom built. There was nothing here before.
No, well, there was a car wash. I tore it down.
Yeah. So you basically started with a blank slate.
Right.
And was that part of the vision, that you wanted a destination, that you wanted a place that people definitely wanted to go to? Because I love the Fort Myers scene, but for the most part, it's the traditional warehouse in an industrial park. Mm-hmm. Which my wife laughs at me. Right. So, and this is the farthest thing from that.
I've been a citrus farmer here for 24 years. And so I have a little, heart for LaBelle. And as I said, that this is one of the, if not the poorest, it's one of the poorest counties in Florida. So it was just my way of trying to help it grow in an interesting way. So, I mean, I didn't need to do it. I didn't know how to do it. I just decided to do it. It was about that simple, although it's not really simple.
Not simple.
Well, what was the community reaction when they saw, there's a brewery?
Yeah, I actually expected a lot of pushback from a small community like this. Like, oh, really? You're going to turn our town into a bar? And so we had to make it clear to them, we're not a bar. We don't sell any hard alcohol. It's family restaurant. It's nice outdoors. It's scenic, and people are going to come here and leave money in your town, and they got over it in a hurry.
I was going to say, because not only do you have your brewing system is right behind the bar, which is right up front, but there is clearly a kitchen, and it seems to be purpose-built, that it was part of what LaBelle Brewing was going to have.
The kitchen is Buckingham Farms, and I had been eating at their restaurant, which is about 20 miles from here, for probably 15 years anyway. And so I went over there one day, and who owns this place? You want to come to LaBelle and do this with us? And I said, sure. So people love the food here.
And obviously for their normal locations, they don't make beverages on site, but you've got an entire lineup of taps and a restaurant right next to them. Was there a lot of discussion in the early stages about what are you going to be brewing, both seasonal and year-round? What are they going to have here, either seasonal or year-round? And sort of discussion, how do you pair? How do you want to kind of go forward?
Our independent menus. The chef is fantastic and makes great food. But when it comes to it, we're doing special event pairings, parties. We'll come together. I wanted to make this dish. Let's pair this beer and advertise a special and do it a little bit that way. So it wasn't combining menus necessarily.
Yeah, the reality is, no sooner did we open that COVID struck, and they had to close down. We could stay open with food trucks and outdoors, but they shut down and went home. So there's really not, until now, been a real opportunity to do more of what Corey's talking about, pairing. So that's what we're talking about now, actually.
I guess that's interesting because technically from a business standpoint, are they a completely separate business?
Totally.
Or so your operation would not have the 509 that attaches to their kitchen?
Yeah, no, I own the building and all the kitchen and everything else. They just lease a kitchen because I didn't want to get in the food business, and they're very good at it.
And that explains why there's a separate door leading into the actual restaurant as opposed to...
No, there's two right there in front. And
there wasn't a door that led into the back that I saw, or is that into the kitchen itself?
There's 3 doors right there. One to go upstairs, 2 to go into the kitchen. Then there's another another door to get in from the outside. But no. In fact, the window, they wanted all glass just like we did, so they feel very strongly about the cleaner your kitchen is, the more that the customer can see, the more comfortable they are. And so it's all glass, and there's a big wide pass-through window that, I mean, if there was no door, you could just jump right through the window.
And obviously with your brew house, they've got the big picture windows as well behind the bar and everything. Was that intentional?
Love watching being watched while I'm brewing. Making mistakes is right out there in front of everybody, but try to minimize that.
Nice. In terms of the system, what did he give you?
It's a Deutsche Beverage 3.5 barrel mash tun and kettle, and we have 3 7-barrel fermenters and a 10-barrel fermenter, along with a 7-barrel bright tank. And then we just added a production facility here in LaBelle, which is a Deutsche 10-barrel with 4 10s.
Okay, so interesting.
And a canning line.
I was going to say, because I did see the cans. I saw the 4-packs.
You were right across the street with our new facility.
Okay.
His beer got so popular so fast that we had no choice.
The distributor is buying every spare drop that's not being served over the counter.
Nice.
Yeah, like I said, when we built this, we weren't planning on distributing at all. And that would have been the perfect brew house. But once we started, and of course, my brothers and son laughed at me. He told you. Built it too small.
And how difficult was that for you in terms of, because your past brewery, which if I'm correct, was Berry Me. Correct. I think I managed to see a beer in distribution. Mm-hmm. They didn't really do a whole lot of it. They stayed
We had
small.
3 beers in distribution at Berry Me. The IPA was the most popular and made it out pretty well in the market.
But now you're on both coasts, and you've got a production facility to keep an eye on.
And it's my IPA instead of a previous brewmaster's IPA, so I'm really excited about that.
So I guess, what was the process? Because there's no chicken soup for the distributing brewery sold. There's no manual for this. How do you how do you decide how big to go, what to do with it? Like, how did you even both come across that decision and sort of plan up? Obviously, no numbers, but how did you sort of decide to just go forward?
Gotta sell the product.
Well, we didn't have to sell.
Well, we have to have product to sell.
It's just when the demand got so great, we had no choice, and so we actually oversized the new facility. So Corey said we have 4 tens in there. It's a 10-barrel cookhouse, but a brew house. But we've already got a new 20-barrel in that we'll do the first batch tomorrow.
Probably tomorrow.
And to be followed by 4 more 20s coming behind it.
What are you going to be christening the kettle with?
It's going to be our cream ale. It's called Courthouse. It's pretty popular. It's our best seller in the tap room and second in distribution.
Awesome. And it actually brings me to a really good point, because I did see the cans. You've got a couple in there, and driving through LaBelle, that Courthouse is unmissable.
Right.
And it brings to mind the much bigger conversation of, this is at LaBelle Brewing because it's in LaBelle. It seems that there is a concerted focus and a want to actually explore and celebrate the community that you're in.
Right.
So I guess, why did you, instead of doing, just Hop to the Future, some sort of a cheesy pop culture tie-in, why did you decide to go with the route of celebrating your community, or the community that is here?
You sort of identified it. We want to celebrate the community. We want to bring people out here. And so we want to, grow and help people grow into LaBelle. So local names, local influence. Got Captain Hendry, who's one of the founders.
Yeah,
The name of my double.
The Captain Hendry house is right here. It's owned by the city, and it's where they have events. Like
that red one that's over there?
No, you can't see it. It's back in these trees back here.
Okay, gotcha.
But it's right on the river.
Cowboy Way.
Yeah, the IPA that we're drinking.
The first road that you come to when you're entering LaBelle from either direction, east or west. It's sort of a loop road around the town.
Okay.
So
Oak Grove is right there.
We've got the Oak Grove on the property.
And then there was another one, the other one that you have canned. Is it Peregrin?
Peregrination.
Peregrination.
Okay, well.
Story behind that, please.
My last name is Peregrin.
Okay.
Fastest bird on the planet is the peregrine falcon. Most people don't know this, but to peregrinate means to travel, to wander, to roam. A peregrination is a journey. Well, Corey makes a fantastic Belgian that's 10.2. So I put a falcon on the front of the can. On the back of the can is Webster's dictionary definition of peregrination. And we put a tagline in there: when you drink this beer, you're going on a journey.
I think we need to pick up a 4-pack. Yeah. So, obviously the names are one thing. The recipes are very different. And especially, you have 2 very different forces sort of fighting you, because you've got the local crowd, and I would assume very strongly that the local crowd in Hendry County, not just LaBelle, but Hendry County as a whole, isn't necessarily craft savvy.
That's right.
But you also have this growing craft savviness that you're sort of drawing from, and it looks like as distribution increases, you're going to have even more people coming down here. So which group wins? Which group do you cater towards?
Oh, got to keep the customers happy.
Well, I'm calling. I was about to say, you're just saying that because he's as hardcore as they come. It's like St. Patrick's Day. You will not find any green dye in any beer here.
Thank you. Just as a beer snob, thank you.
And he likes to be very crafty and do different stuff. I have to force him to, look, we got 3 beers in distribution. We got to brew them. So that new facility across the street, that's all we brew over there, 3 beers. And then over here, he can do whatever he wants.
So over there is Courthouse, Cream Ale,
Cowboy Way,
Peregrination.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Going back to the names, the other thing that was interesting about us being here in LaBelle, you may or may not be aware, but there's been a festival here for I don't know, 50 years, 70 years. It's the last weekend of February every year, and it's called the Swamp Cabbage Festival.
You know something? I actually do remember that. This is not my first time to LaBelle, and I remember looking it up, wondering exactly where I was, and I saw that.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know what swamp cabbage is, this isn't something you can go to the grocery store and purchase.
Right. And so they've never had beer at the festival before. And since we came to town, they went, well, we got our own home brewery here. So we were the first ones ever to sell beer there. And so Corey did a couple beers special just for swamp cabbage. And one was the cabbage quaff. And then the other was, and of course the cabbage quaff had swamp cabbage in it.
Sure did.
And then we do swamp stomper.
Which is the New England.
Gotcha. And what was cabbage quaff?
Cabbage quaff is a IPA with the heart of palm, swamp cabbage, coconut, and habanero. When I tasted the swamp cabbage raw, it reminded me of somewhat of coconut, so just enhanced that kind of flavor and hit it with a little spice.
Which is interesting because heart of palm has a very meaty quality to it, almost beefy, but not quite, with I guess less protein, shall we say? So it's interesting that you decided to do that. Now, since you own a lot of orange groves, Dan, have you used that as the impetus to use a lot of citrus in some of the beers, especially maybe a Belgian wit? Because obviously, and just grab, I was like, hey, give me some more bullshiels. I need to make beer. And then just pop them in.
Haven't done a wit last year, and I was just out there earlier. There's a blueberry farm here in LaBelle. Last year I did a blueberry Hefeweizen with local blueberries. Dan's Orange Groves have produced great citrus, and another cool beer name is, we're in a barn, big barn, so Belle of the Barn is a citrus blonde ale with LaBelle Grove citrus.
And isn't that one of our best sellers?
It's also, when it's on, it's a seasonal. Can't keep fresh oranges all the time. It rivals Courthouse in sales for number one.
Yeah, but we don't can it, so we sell it real fast at the tap.
That's funny. So your 3-core, you obviously have, I guess we'll talk about Cowboy Way first, because it is the beer that's in front of Steve and I. And Steve, what are you're almost done with
Mine
yours.
is gone. Yeah. One sip left, it's done.
You had mentioned that this is as close to a West Coast as you wanted to. It's not quite as face melting. Mm-hmm. It's not quite as dank, which I thank you for, because you can still get a lot of those alpha acids. You can still get a lot of those lupulins, but it doesn't necessarily get in the way of a solid malt bill, a nice biscuity sort of quality to it. Why was that something that you wanted to do? Why is that the way that you wanted to go with the one beer that everybody expects a brewery to have on tap?
I prefer West Coast. I like a crisp, clean IPA, front end bitterness, and then citrusy on the back end, but not overwhelmingly dank, not full juice. I really like Russian River, Pliny the Elder, Bell's Two Hearted. These are big influential beers for me, and like a middle of the road production IPA that we can always have hops for. We're not buying anything crazy that's only available every 3 years, and didn't want to overwhelm our local market either with something that's way over bitter or just juicy mud water.
No, I gotcha.
Yeah.
But I do find that interesting, especially with breweries that are like yours, that go into places that are not traditionally craft beer markets. They always tend to lead with a cream ale. I've just noticed that. And it always tends to be a big mover.
Yep.
Is that the reason why you decided to...
I had to have a light beer. Do a really good Pilsner. Got a German Pils lagering right now, which will be nice and crisp and Germany hoppy kind of. So should be right on point. That'll be a big seller. Belle of the Barn is a big seller. It's a light beer kind of atmosphere.
You need those hot day drinkers. Those you've been outside working and you need to have something.
Yeah, this is Florida.
Yeah.
But the milk stout is in our always,
of course,
on draft core menu. So for the Guinness fans and the stout lovers,
the Red Tide Red's rather popular as
Irish
well.
Red, always on.
Again, a Florida named beer, west side of Florida, Red Tide Red.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're right on the Caloosahatchee, so.
And then as you've continued to be open, because you have been open for a long time, not long time, but you've been open enough to where you've got most of the local crowd when they come in. Have you started to educate them? Have they started to, I've done my time with Courthouse. I love it. Let's dip our toes into deeper water.
I would say yes. We have, in addition to Corey being the brewmaster, we have another guy named Jordan who's been brewing for years and years, and I make him actually 10 bar every Wednesday. So he'll tell you more than you want to know. Corey doesn't spend much time behind the bar, if any at all, and so you're really not on the scene explaining the beer. And then we have, Britt, who's tending bar today. She brews with Corey and Jordan, and her father-in-law to be is a brewmeister at another Southwest brewery. Not going to name names. and interestingly, the other people that work here behind the bar have taken the time and the effort to learn and speak the language that even I don't bother to. I just drink the beer. I enjoy it.
But in that interest is sort of natural from them. That's something that they really wanted to do, and they searched it out on their own.
I'd say so, yeah.
So you're the only person who doesn't know anything about the beer.
I know what it costs.
He doesn't.
He knows what he likes.
Yeah, and there's plenty to choose from.
Yeah.
I guess, are you amazed at the success that you've had because your name is getting out there? You're distributing farther than I even had any idea of. From tiny little LaBelle, is it surprising, or is that just sort of expected what you knew was going to happen once the doors finally opened?
It's been what I've been working for a while. I'm glad Suncoast came out here when I did and said they kept wanting to distribute my beer. That's cool.
I say having a distributor follow you to a new brewery is insane.
Yeah.
Because it gives you the opportunity of not having to sell yourself.
Quite an accolade. But I think, I've been to enough breweries since I got interested in craft beer that I've been to some that not a single one of their beers is worth drinking. And we have people that come here quite frequently from other breweries, employees and brewmasters, and they're just astounded. Yesterday at the Naples Beer Fest, we had several of our quote-unquote competitors coming over and saying, quite frankly, this beer is better than ours. We're going like, and they kept coming back drinking it. So am I astounded? No. The beer's that good in my opinion.
Obviously, you're doing the 16-ounce tall boys. Do you ever think you'll try and go the hype brewery route of the big barrel age or something stout with the
We're getting there.
You're getting there?
It was
Bomber
COVID
releases.
last year. We gotta put together our basics, and now we're gonna have some relief on the production beers. We'll be able to get some more cool stuff going in the brew pub here.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult. Are you the only person that does both sides, or
the assistant brewer Jordan, who Dan was just talking about, is helping me at both places, and Britt's learning the ropes. She's going to get some more responsibility here down the road.
Yeah, for 2 systems and a 3-person team, that's got to be some lengthy days.
Just work till the beer's ready.
It takes just as long to cook it for a 20 barrel as it does a 7, so it all depends.
And then canning day, hopefully, is somewhat easy.
Something we're learning about, and I'm really excited to be able to pump out a whole lot more cans. Despite
Awesome.
the can shortage and everything, having to fight for cans.
But I do find it interesting that, you just started canning, but you've already gone over the 12. You're into the 16-ounce tall boys. And that seems to be what the industry is really starting to go towards.
We never did 12s.
Yeah.
We never did. Well, I take that back. Maybe initially we did some 12s, but
We got some cans from another brewery in town for some of our very first trials at it, but we decided that the 16s is the craft industry standard.
And you're totally right. It's becoming the standard.
Yeah, right.
It really is.
yeah, if you go into a store and you want a craft beer, I look for the 16s.
Yep.
12 is just a production beer.
I was going to say, you just got a couple 16s. I got a couple 16s to give to you. So it's interesting that has become the standard for craft at the very least.
Well, also think about the shelf, too. When you go to like a Total Wine or Publix, 16s line up easier. 4-packs line up easier than a 6-pack does. Every time.
We're in Total Wine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. Which ones?
The ones over here on the West Coast.
Okay, yeah, obviously. No love for us.
I'll call Ed.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be doing a lot more on the East Coast.
I was going to say, you've grown by leaps and bounds since you've opened, and you have not been open that long.
14 months? 15 months?
Yeah. Do you still have checkpoints that you are looking to hit further down the road? Are there still growth plans that you have and ideas that you have? Or at this point, are you just like wanting to solidify what you have?
No. We want to stay fluid, no pun intended. And the next plan that we're kicking around right now and starting to do our homework on is, to work with a good distributor, they got to be able to get the beer and get it to their customers. Well, we're way over here, so to conquer the East Coast, I think that what we'll do is go ahead and build a whole other facility on the East Coast so that distributors will want to work with us.
Would you be interested in doing a production facility like you have across the street, or would you be interested in taking this, copying this, and placing it in Melbourne or Fort Lauderdale or something like that?
My original plan was just to do a production facility that sells into distribution. But once again, my brothers and my son call me stupid. Why would you do that without a tap room? And so, okay. I don't know. We're working on it.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I could see this kind of tap room fitting in Deerfield. It would fit perfect with the aesthetic of Deerfield Beach.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's got a higher class, small town sort of a feel. This is definitely, you can see the barn. You can see that sort of aesthetic in there. And just immediately when you come inside, but it is a little bit stepped up, kind of like one of the games, the Chip and Joanna games almost, something like that. And I do want to, because when you come in, obviously you've got that aesthetic, but you've also got this absolutely gorgeous piece of, what is that, driftwood, or is that, what is that?
The piece of the acacia?
Yes, that has to have a story, because it's absolutely stunning.
Well, I had seen some of those before over the years, but they were much, much smaller. And I wanted the bar to be open, but not. So I wanted a faux wall, a wall that wasn't a wall. And so that's a piece of art, and it does a really good job of separating the people at the bar from the other patrons. Because when you walk in the front door, the hostess station is straight past. So I didn't want little kids bumping into people at the bar and tugging on.
To be fair, you didn't want people at the bar bumping into little kids.
Both. So that's why we did that.
That is kind of, like I said, it's definitely a centerpiece and kind of a stunning piece. And you've got little touches like that throughout the location, throughout the brewery, which I find absolutely fantastic. Don't know if there was a question there, but
it's been fun. That I just had let's call it a eureka moment, but not a very grand one. But to create a beer can label actually takes a lot of work, thinking about it. And you see a lot of crazy ones out there. And finally, the other day I went, why not make those a piece of art and frame? I haven't seen anybody do that before. And so what I did when the artists, designers, whatever you want to call them, create the can, they also have to create all the technical specs to tell the printer what to do, and it's all on
the side of the can.
Well, not on the one that you see in the store,
right?
But so we decided to print those because they add a different dimension to. So I print them poster size and just framed them. Now I'm going to hang them up.
Interesting. I was going to say, will you sell prints of those?
Yes.
Okay. Because I definitely Like I said, the one for the Courthouse Cream is actually really, really stunning. And yeah, the only other brewery that I've seen that would probably do something like that would be Saltwater, with a lot of the
Beet
aquatic
culture.
Beet culture. Yes, beet culture as well. Big old orange truck driving by.
Well, the city's actually abandoning this road to us, so that won't be going on much longer.
Interesting.
It'll be cornhole out there.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you are going to be that, and it's nice because where we are, kind of on the back patio right now, is between the brewery facility. There's a side road, and then a rather sizable retention pond,
And then the river.
kind of there, and then the river.
River's around the other side of the trees.
Oh, okay. It does kind of drop off, doesn't
Yep.
it?
Well, the houses you see the blue houses on the
Oh,
other side of the river.
interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here that I did not
Intercoastal
expect.
Waterway.
Yep.
I didn't realize that we were. Yeah, I had no idea.
In fact, I kayak from my house. There's a beach down there. I pull up, walk up, have a few beers, and
Go back.
hope to get home.
So you have
Yeah,
to
the
deal
East
with this
Coast
kayak.
Intercoastal isn't the only intercoastal in Florida. You know that.
No, I don't.
Ours is just the best.
Gotcha.
Right.
Oh, shots fired. Awesome. So there's a lot going on at LaBelle Brewing, a lot more than I think most people anticipate. And I guess the last question is, do you get that? Do you get a lot of, oh my gosh, I had no idea? They just come in and they expected, here's the same couple of beers and
what could
they're
possibly be in LaBelle?
Well, no. Before I went on your website and saw the pictures of the brewery, I was expecting like warehouse, standard, small tap room, maybe a patio, and food trucks. That was about it.
That's what you expect out of
You come out here,
most
beautiful
Florida
building.
breweries.
Like this place is awesome. Definitely worth the destination trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely can't wait to come here again. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
So there you have it, 3 excellent breweries from across the state doing some incredible things. And if you do decide to go visit them or any others, please reach out and let us know. I always like hearing about what's going on with our listeners and our readers. If you want details or show notes, the best place to do is to go to floridabeerpodcast.com. We'd love your feedback. The Florida Podcast Network has a closed Facebook group just for superfans of the shows, like the Florida Beer Podcast. All you have to do is go onto Facebook and search for FPN Insiders to leave comments, tell us the latest brewery you visited. Once we get some deals and some contests out there, we'll go ahead and put those up as well. We look forward to hanging out with all of you there. Florida Beer Podcast is a production of FloridaBeerBlog.com. You can find us at FloridaBeerBlog.com, FloridaBeerPodcast.com. If you're on the socials, we are on Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter. FL Beer Blog is on Facebook, or you can write us directly at FloridaBeerBlog@gmail.com. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. Thank you so much to everybody who appeared on today's show, and thank you so much to you for listening. If you enjoyed listening to the episodes, subscribe to us. We have episodes going out every other week. Rate us, leave a review, tell your friends, give us a nice juicy 5-star. Do whatever you can to help spread the word about Florida craft beer. Thank you so much. We will see you on the next episode where we will talk all about spirits, and we're not talking about ghost adventures. We will see you then and drink Florida craft.